And as people are coming in, I'll do my usual spiel in that
Mhm.
Belmont Books is an independent bookstore in the greater Boston area, but with, virtual events, we have people joining us from all over. So if you're not local,
Mhm.
we still love to have you here. We also have two international authors with us that probably wouldn't be possible if not for the
Mhm.
unfortunate current state of things, but there is
Yeah.
a silver lining. We do have a pretty robust events calendar, given everything is virtual. So no more events this week, but next week we have Tuesday. Catherine McKenzie is doing her launch. She has a new
Ooh,
thriller out called
yeah,
Six
for
Feet to
sure.
Mm.
Live. So she's going to be with us. And then we have on Wednesday Tova Martin with her new gardening memoir. It looks super cute. Um, and then we
Gardening
have
memoir. Wow.
yeah, a gardening memoir.
That's
It's
cool. I never would have thought, those two
yeah,
things
a
are.
year of insights and inspiration from my garden. The garden in
Aw,
every sense and season.
Oh,
It
that's
looks great.
nice. I kill every plant I own, so I don't even
I
know what
can't.
that's about.
yeah.
I appreciate anyone who can keep a plant alive.
Me too.
And then we have another
Yeah, this
memoir.
one is fake.
This one
Is it?
And my husband is like, "Oh, you'll find a way to kill that one too."
it'll just collect dust until it disintegrates. Is
Yeah.
probably what will happen.
Yeah.
And then Thursday, another memoir. This one about grief. It's called Little Matches by Marianne O'Hara, who is, I believe, local to Belmont. So
Okay.
all three very different things.
Wow. Are you doing all of them?
Mm.
I'm not hosting. I don't think I'm hosting any of those that week. No, wait, I lied. I'm hosting Marianne O'Hara's event, Little
Okay.
Matches.
Okay.
Mm.
So if any of you have seen me host before and haven't gotten tired of my face yet, feel free to pop in on Thursday.
Definitely.
I'm also so happy to have both Uzma and Jesse here. I know Jesse's book has been highly anticipated by a lot of readers, and Uzma's sophomore romance has also been highly anticipated for a lot of readers. So,
Mhm.
congrats to Uzma on a best-selling book. Congrats to Jesse on
Mhm.
her adult debut. It's been a good month. Um, so I'm going to introduce both of these authors. They're going to talk for 45 minutes or so, and then there will be a Q&A portion. So for those of you attending, there's a bar at the bottom of your screen with two little speech bubbles that says Q&A. You can submit your questions there. Both Uzma and Jesse and I will be able to see them, and then they will be answered at about 8:15 Eastern time. So, and oh, there's an attendee, Annie from Australia, who's tuning in. So thanks,
Yeah.
Annie,
Hi.
for coming in. So we'll start with Uzma's bio. Uzma Jalaluddin is a teacher and also writes a funny parenting column named Samosas and Maple Syrup for the Toronto Star, which is Canada's largest daily newspaper. Her debut novel was Aisha at Last, and now her sophomore novel, Hana Khan Carries On, came out on the 13th. Was it April 13th?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
13th in the US.
And we do, I believe, have signed book plates at the store for Hana Khan Carries On if you're interested. And then Jessie Sutanto has a previous YA novel, but this is her first adult novel, and we're very excited about it. She grew up shuttling back and forth between Indonesia, Singapore, and Oxford, and considers all three places her home. She has a master's from Oxford University, but she has yet to figure out how to say that without sounding obnoxious. She has 42 first cousins, 30 aunties and uncles, many of whom live just down the road. While she's not writing, she's gaming with her husband, mostly first person shooters, or making a mess in the kitchen with her two daughters. It all sounds very exciting. I'm sure Uzma and Jesse have a lot to talk about. I will be back a little later, but thank you all for coming, and thank you, Uzma, and thank you, Jesse.
Of course. Thanks, Amanda, for that introduction. Jesse, first of all, congratulations on the launch of Dial A for
Yay.
Aunties. I'm so excited for you. Are you excited?
Yeah. So
It's-
excited, but mostly like nervous.
It's going to do great. I loved your book. I'm such a fan. It was hilarious. I remember reading it and actually laughing out loud. And I can't remember the last time that's happened when I've read a book. So thank you so much for writing such a funny book. We really need it during these times. And I have questions for you. So I hope you're ready. Okay, so my first question is, both of our books actually feature, they're kind of similar in some ways. So my book is Hana Khan Carries On, the cover is over there. And both our books feature strong, hilarious, sarcastic, older Asian women. So in your case, Chinese versus Chinese Indonesian, right? And in my case, I have one of my main characters, Kokab, is from India, and they all sort of prod our main characters. In your case, it's Mehdi, and in my case, it's Hannah. Towards, change. So like in my case, Hannah's aunt visits from India, she bosses her around, she insults her. And in your book, you have big aunt, second aunt, ma, fourth aunt, and there's like an entire group of women who surround Mehdi. I was just wondering, who inspired you?
It's so funny that you have kind of like a similar, character in your book, and you're like describing them as like this, strong, bossy, older Asian lady. And I'm like, is that like the only flavor they come in?
It's so true.
It's like, I feel like I was telling my husband, like once I turn 50, it's like a switch will be clicked on, and that is it. Like I will become that like bossy, really loud, older woman who has like no filter and
hashtag goals. That's for me.
Yeah. And I can't wait, until I get there. But I do feel like it's something, I'm trying to think of like a single, more passive like aunt of mine, and I literally cannot think of one.
Maybe they don't come in quiet. That's not the flavor that they come
like
in.
Out of, I don't know, like the maybe out of like the 30 aunts that I have, like I can think of maybe one who is like more quiet and like calm, but she's not that calm,
so you're kind of writing from real life.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, what about you?
Yeah, I feel like that too. And it's so interesting because I know we're going to get into this a little bit later, but like the stereotype about Asian women are that they're quiet and submissive and passive. And I'm like, have you met any Asian women? Because my relatives won't shut up. It's so interesting, right?
Yes.
So, and kind of keeping on the same theme, the theme of you actually mentioned this in your book, you actually name it, which I thought was great. Like the idea of filial piety. So like the sort of the respect and the responsibility that the younger generation owes to their elders. Filial piety plays a big role in Dial A for Aunties. And it's sort of like what motivates Mehdi to stay with her aunts. I love the way that you dealt with this. I thought you dealt with it in a really nuanced way, because you pointed out that, Mehdi feels their love, but she struggles against their expectations at times. And I know that my own characters, in both my first book and my second book, they also feel this kind of struggle between loyalty to their parents, to their community. They feel sort of defensive. And it's an ingrained defensiveness. It's not, imposed on them. But I find that oftentimes stories that are set in Asian families portray filial piety as like a bad thing. It's something to be thrown off in search of individual happiness. Did you really try to push back against this stereotype in your book? Like, was it a purposeful thing, or was it just something that, you were interested in exploring? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
That's such a great question. And I have like so many thoughts on it, because it's never something that I thought of
Right.
until I went overseas. My cousins and I were all kind of around the same age, so we went to college at sort of the same time. And up until that point, we have been like bitching about our families and like, oh, there's so much expectation, blah blah blah. But then when like non-Asian friends were like, wow, yeah, your family sounds messed up, like as a collective we were like turn and be like, what did you say about my family? And then I became like very defensive about it. And it was really interesting how we completely shifted from seeing it as a burden to kind of seeing like, oh, I kind of get why things are like that. And then after I got married, actually, I was living in England. So I did leave my family. And then I realized that, oh my gosh, I'm miserable without them, So they actually had a point in, trying to keep me close. And so a few years later, I managed to convince my husband, like, let's give Indonesia a try. And we ended up like he ended up falling in love with it, and now he doesn't ever want to like go back to England. um Whereas when I get angry at my family, I'm like, oh, that is it, we're leaving to England. And but he's like, no, 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 we're staying here.
I love that. That's great.
So yeah. So I wanted to address that in the book, as how complicated this feeling is of wanting to leave, but also realizing that actually you belong there. So it's like a constant struggle, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's so nice to hear about it from like an insider's point of view. Like you actually know what it's like because you grew up in that family. And I sometimes I
Mhm.
think about this, like North American culture is, it stresses so much about individual freedom, individual
Yeah,
independence and
and
happiness. And
independence. Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of
Yeah.
Asian cultures, like my parents are from India, it's like, yeah, that's important. You should be happy as
Yeah.
on an individual level, but what about the collective,
Mhm.
right? The family has to be happy.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the family. And I think it's so at odds, right? To the individual versus the
uh,
family.
yeah. I mean, it's so funny that, you mentioned that for your parents, there's at least like a balance. Whereas for mine, because they're just so melodramatic, especially my dad, he's like, I don't even care about my own happiness. It's all for the family. Okay. Like, yeah. So they don't even pretend to have some sort of like healthy balance.
It's so true. I feel like that too. Like they're so used to just like, I know this is the case for my mother. They're just so self-sacrificing. And then sometimes
Yeah.
when I think about myself first, I feel like a monster. So that's the balance, I guess, that we're striking here.
No, but like, do your parents do this where it gets to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, like you literally do not have to, sacrifice yourself. There is no need for sacrifice in this situation,
Yeah,
but then they do anyway,
I
just so
know.
they can make you feel bad about it
It's
later
like it's a
on.
habit. It's like, no, that's the
Yeah.
only reaction that I have to things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think you capture that so well with the character arc of Medi, right? Like she really wants to be there for her aunts and her mom, and she struggles with that throughout the whole book. So we're really, as readers, we're really rooting for her to try, to make
Mhm.
her family happy, but also find happiness for herself. I really like that. Okay, so I have another question. Your novel is set in
Mhm.
California, but you yourself have a global identity. You grew up in both Singapore, which I visited, it's
Mhm.
beautiful, and Indonesia, which where I've also visited, loved it.
You've been
Uh,
everywhere.
I
I
know.
love it.
And you've completed a master's in creative writing in Oxford. I haven't been to Oxford.
Mhm.
How I want to know, how does this global identity sort of contribute to Dial A for Aunties? And the other question I have is, why did you choose to set the book in the US? Because I was honestly picturing the entire time when they were on the island, because they go to an island where the wedding actually takes place. Hilarious. The Weekend at Bernie's stuff happens at the island. I was really picturing Indonesia. And I kind of want to go there. Wherever this island is, I want to go. So tell me about, sort of how your global identity fits into your writing, and why did you choose to set it in the US?
That's amazing that you kind of like picked up on that. It feels very Indonesian, the location, because it actually was just completely based on Bali. Like even the hotel. Yeah.
I knew it.
Hotel,
it's so good when I'm right.
I was like, I completely based it on like a particular hotel in Bali. I don't know if I can.
Which
actually,
hotel?
Like, say
can you tell me?
Am I allowed to? Like, is there like some copyright? Oh, okay. So it's the Kempinski Apurva in Bali, and it's so beautiful. So my parents' friend owns it, and he invited all of us to go there one day, and it was just really, really beautiful. And I completely based like the architecture on that hotel.
I love it. So
and
beautiful.
the island is Bali. But I kind of felt like I had to set it in the US because a few years ago, I was actually on submissions with a book that is set in Indonesia. And it just got rejected by everyone. And then a couple of editors were honest enough, I guess, to be like, we love it, but a story that is set in, such a foreign country, we would really struggle finding an audience for it. And so I was like, okay, I'll set it in America, which is fine because it's secretly Bali. I was just like, when I am rich and famous, I shall set a novel in Indonesia.
I love this story. And you know what, Jessie, the reason why I can relate to this so much is because for myself, okay, I'm Canadian. Canada and the US, like the United States treats Canada like we're basically the 52nd state. And I was told the same thing, that no, if you want to be published in the United States, you have to change the location to the United States.
Yeah.
I was like, we're both English speaking countries. We're right beside each other. We're basically like the same thing. We're not the same thing,
That's
but
amazing.
It's very offensive to Canadians to say that we're like Americans, but whatever. But so
have you just offended the entirety of Canada?
Possibly both sides. US, Canadians, I love you both equally. We're all friends here. But I completely understand this pressure to just, set the book in the United States. But I do think you did a good job giving a lot of nods to Indonesian culture and to Indonesian just the sense of place. I felt you did that really, really well. So it really is the United States, but it's actually Bali. I can totally see that. Good job. It was awesome. And the Kempinski Hotel, we all need to go there. Can we just stop for a second and talk about your title? I have a book title story too that I really want to share, but I want to know, Dial A for Aunties is such a great nod to Alfred Hitchcock, Dial M for Murder. And, and I want to hear your title story. Let me quickly share mine. Aisha at Last. It was such a hard time. My first novel was so hard to find the title for my first book, because titles are tough. Like titles are so difficult. When I first went out with my novel, my title was because it's a Muslim Pride and Prejudice retelling. It was originally titled Beauty and the Beard. So it was about a guy with a long beard.
I kind of love that, actually.
I know, I liked it too. My editor bought it, but said, no, the title has to change. And then we went through a whole bunch of titles. One of them was Aisha doesn't want to get married. Aisha Ever After, and then finally,
I like that one too.
Yeah, that's cute too. And then finally we got Aisha at Last. And then even with Hana Khan Carries On, it took me so long to come up with a good title. I think we're getting some laughter from the panel, from the guests here about Beauty and the Beard. So tell me about your title. Did you know right away? Was it just like, yep, this is the title, or tell me the story.
No, I'm so terrible with titles.
Me too.
Yeah, literally my document title as I was writing was Murder Aunties. It was just a placeholder. It was never going to be the title. But
No. You should have kept it Murder Aunties. Can you imagine? I would buy it immediately.
And then when it was done, I was like asking all my friends, like, oh, help me come up with a title that is not Murder Aunties. And so one of them, she actually was like, I'm kind of trying to think of like some play on, some well-known movie or book, and I was like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but do go on. I think she was like, oh, maybe like the Hunger Games, but like the Auntie Games, and she was like, or I don't know. And then she came out with it like ballet for aunties, and I was like, what? That is perfect. Like, how
Wow.
some people are so good at that.
That's
And
a really useful
so
friend.
lucky. Yeah, very, very, very useful.
Aisha, at last, I had a similar experience. I couldn't come up with a title, and I actually invited my family over for dinner, and I made like biryani, like a big pot of biryani, and I said, okay, you get dinner, but first you have to help me brainstorm titles. And
oh my gosh, you held the food hostage.
I'm a bad Asian daughter. and my mother-in-law came up with the title. She said, Aisha at last. So sometimes people they just have a brainwave, right? So yeah, that's awesome.
Wow. So holding food hostage really works.
It works.
If
it works, I highly recommend it. Okay, so my next question is, I really loved all the descriptions of the wedding traditions in your book. The tea ceremony, the veiling of the bride ceremony. And, like my book, Hana Khan Carries On, also includes a lot of like traditions and, just sort of like even some like religious rituals. Sadly, in my book, I have a funeral and, some of the Muslim funeral rites and things like that. I was just wondering, are there any other fun cultural details that you wanted to include, but you kind of had to edit out? And how important was it to include these little, cultural, did it just come naturally, or did you make it a point to include all of these traditions?
I actually created a list of all of the cultural things that we did at my wedding. And then I did have to take out a couple of them because it didn't fit with the plot. I felt like there wasn't enough room for it. So one of the one of the traditions is that the parents of the bride and groom are supposed to feed them a whole boiled egg.
I love that.
They're huge. Like, it has to be whole. You can't like cut it because it's supposed to symbolize fertility. Right. And so yeah, and then you have to, like, I don't know why, but my dad was trying to pick it up with chopsticks. Like, I don't know why he didn't use a spoon. And so of course he kept like dropping it. And I was just like, oh my God. It's really huge. And I was like chewing, and then the yolk was just so like thick, no. Like, it was really, really difficult. And I think my husband swallowed his whole, which, we also would not recommend. So, now I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, why did I cut that out? Because that would have been
next book.
Yeah.
So
you
funny.
have to tell me like a funny, wedding tradition.
For Indian weddings, one of the things that they do, and we didn't do this in my wedding because my husband refused, but we have like a lot of like events leading up to the actual wedding. And one of the events is the mendi. So I don't know if they have this in Indonesia, where they put the henna designs on the hands, like the beautiful henna designs. And so one of the things that you do is you have, like those are at the mendi party, or even on the wedding day, the bride's family, the girls steals the groom's shoes. and then holds them
Oh, yeah,
hostage.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
he can't go into the room to get married until he pays off the
yeah.
bride's family. And so, and
Mm-hmm.
it goes
Yeah,
like they start bartering, he can't find the
yeah,
shoes, and it's this whole tradition. But my husband
yeah.
was like, I'm not doing that. That's not happening. I like my shoes. Don't touch my shoes.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So my best friend is Indian, and I remember she had that at her before the wedding, and the her husband is white, and so he and his friends, like they had been told, what the tradition was going to be, but when it happened, they were just like so awkward and so like out of place, and they were like, can I have my shoes back? And then and then of course my best friends like family were just like no, and they were like, oh, okay. And then they had to kind of coach them like, no, you have to offer us something, like blah
Yeah.
blah. I felt so bad for the poor guy.
He needed like a wedding whisperer to be like, okay, now you have to
Yeah,
say
yeah, he
this.
really did.
You
He
negotiate.
needed a bossy aunt.
He needed a bossy aunt to be his representative. Yeah,
Yeah,
see, this
yeah,
is that the older Asian aunties are, they
yeah,
do all of that.
yep.
I love these fun stories, but so I'm going to change gears here a little bit and talk about something a
Mhm,
little bit serious and a bit more sad.
mhm,
In North America, there's been a rising tide of anti-Asian hate. I know that you've written about this on your Twitter feed. How do you
mhm,
think books like Dial A for Aunties counteracts this in some way? And do you think we need more happy stories from our communities, our respective communities?
mhm,
And this is something I think about. I get asked this question a lot too, and I personally feel like it's
mhm,
so important to have a whole breadth of stories coming out of our communities: the
mhm,
happy stories, the serious stories.
mhm.
What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, totally. So it's interesting because my family, so we're ethnically Chinese, and there has been a lot of tension between like the native Indonesians and the Chinese Indonesians, which hasn't been helped obviously due to COVID. There has been like more anti-Chinese like sentiment here as well.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Sorry to hear that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. But what's been really nice is like listening to radio shows here where the hosts are a mix of native Indonesians and Chinese Indonesians, and they're very lighthearted, and it's such a nice break from the serious stuff, where like maybe the Chinese radio host is talking about all the pain and all the hate, which is also important. But when I listen to it, I get very like sad. Whereas when I listen to the happy ones, I'm like, oh, that's what it's like when we all get along. And so I felt like books that show kind of like the joyful side of things, they're so important because they really humanize people, right? And these radio shows that I listen to, I feel like they really really humanize the people more so than anything else, like any other format, I feel, because they're really like just so honest and so fun, and they talk about like day-to-day lives. And that was actually something which I enjoyed so much in Hana Khan. I felt like it was so funny, but then it also deals with like really serious issues, but in a very realistic and humanizing way. And I actually wanted to ask you, like, was that difficult to write, like in terms of marrying the serious and the lighthearted?
Um, It was. And actually the first part of Hana Khan Carries On is sort of like just a classic rom-com. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
halfway through, you have a hate motivated attack that comes out of
Yeah.
nowhere, right? Like she's literally
Mm-hmm.
walking downtown in Toronto and then she gets
Mm-hmm.
attacked. And
Yeah.
I wanted it to jar the reader because I feel like that's
Yeah.
what happens. That's like real life. You
Yeah.
don't walk around
Yeah.
expecting anything bad to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
when it does, you're like, what did I do? What happened? Like, where did
Mm-hmm.
that come from? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so much of that is just like our lived reality, right? Like, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
I wear hijab. I'm, you know, when I walk around downtown Toronto,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very comfortable in my city. I've lived here all my life, but I'm also, a little
Yeah.
part of me is also really aware of, okay, who's around me? You know, is anyone
Yeah.
coming a little bit too close? All of that kind of stuff. And like you, I
Yeah.
love reading and listening to escapist kind of fiction, fiction that puts a smile on my face, because when I read the newspaper every day, it's so depressing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and as important as I think that is, I think it's also really important to celebrate the goofy parts of our culture and the funny parts of our culture, and
Yeah.
to remind ourselves that there's hope and there's laughter, right? And that kind of gets
Mm-hmm.
us through that feeling of optimism. But yeah,
Yeah.
those scenes in Hana Khan did, I know some of them made me choke up. I think it brought up a lot of
Mm-hmm.
like my own fears and my own vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
when I was writing them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's art,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's what it's supposed to make you feel something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you did that so well, and I also noticed like how jarring it was, and you know, I was like, oh no, this is so unfortunately
Yeah,
realistic, because
I know.
there is no warning,
Exactly.
it's not like a narrator is gonna be like, oh, and today she is about to have a bad day.
There's no music in the background, like, oh no,
Yeah,
something's gonna happen. Yeah, and it
yeah.
that's real life though, you know, that's how it
Mm-hmm.
happens. And I wanted to put the reader in, you know, in those shoes. Okay, so I think we're going to be moving to Q&A in a couple of minutes. um
Mm-hmm.
I have two questions I really want to get to. The first one
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit about your process. So you say you're a fast
Mm-hmm.
drafter, and even though, and Dial A for Aunties was your ninth book, so you're so persistent,
Mm-hmm.
but you wrote it really quickly. You wrote it in 2 months. It took you
Yeah.
a month to edit. I'm in such awe of you because it takes me years to write a book, years. So can you tell me a little bit about your writing process? What is a day in the life
Mhm.
of writer Jess like?
It's gonna be so disappointing. I used to have like all these amazing writing rituals. I used to have like I had to have like the exact right spot, and like a candle and tea and then a snack, and then I have to kind of like meditate, and then I can write. But but then ever since I had kids, it's like, no, you just gotta write whenever. So I just try to wake up as early as possible, and then kind of race down, and I don't even shut down my computer the night before, so that I can just like start that really quickly, and then I literally just like speed write, until I hear like the cry of like, Mama, where did you go? Then I'm like, oh, okay, that I'm done for the day. Um, Up until the afternoon when I can like, okay, why don't you go to grandma's house? Like, go. Then I can kind of like plan out what I want to write the next day, the next morning, and that is pretty much it. I really don't have time, to kind of like look at the computer and ponder or anything. I think I have at the most like 2 hours a day at the most, um, to spend writing, which is really ironic because I am writing so much more and like so much faster than when I had all the time in the world. So it's actually been really good for me to have like that very limited window of time.
You have to be more efficient, right? Like it's all about just being a busy mom. Like I totally get that, you know, and just like finding
Mm-hmm.
I remember when my children are a lot older than yours, they're teenagers now, but I remember when they were young, it would
Mm-hmm.
be like, okay, you're going to your swimming class. I have half an
Mm-hmm.
hour. I'm going to sit there and type furiously. And there was actually a Twitter
Yeah.
thread that was going around yesterday that was really talking about, you know, how sometimes male writers have this luxury of saying, no,
Mm.
I don't have time to cook and clean and things like that. And
Mm.
sort of making fun of like the, you know, the little pockets of time where women just have to create, right? We
Mm.
don't have a choice. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is the time I have, and I love that you're being
Yeah.
more efficient. Uh, okay, so can we talk about the Netflix adaptation? I love Nanachka Khan. She's the
Mm.
showrunner, I believe, of Fresh Off the Boat. And so, and your book, even before it was published, has already been optioned. You're the executive director of I think it's a Netflix movie. Is that what it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be?
Yeah,
So
it's a
exciting.
movie. Yeah.
Congratulations. This
Yeah.
is very, very cool. I can't wait. When I was reading it, I just thought I can see this as a movie. I can see it's already rolling out in front of me. Can you tell us a little bit about this? Whatever you can tell us. Will you have any input into it? Tell us about this amazing news.
Mm-hmm. So I'm actually executive producer, not director,
Oh, sorry.
although I'm not.
Right.
No, it's fine. I
Yeah.
just I'm not quite sure. I think it just means like they can consult with me on things in the movie, which they have been, and it's so nice. Like once in a while, I hear from the scriptwriter, Courtney Kang, who was a scriptwriter on Fresh Off the Boat, I think, and some other amazing shows, which I can't remember off the top of my head now. But she sometimes emails me and is like, "Oh, what would they say in Indonesian in this context? What are the snacks that they would eat?" and stuff like that. And it's just amazing, like hearing that from her. So I've been really happy about that. So the process of like getting the movie deal was so unreal, because it actually happened not long after we went into lockdown. This was back in last April, and so everyone was really depressed, and I was like, oh, so sad. Oh no, I'm like stuck in the house with a toddler and like a 5-year-old. What am I gonna do? But then this happened. I was like, oh, you know, I wasn't given a chance to really be very sad for very long. This was like such a roller coaster. And Nanachka Khan, she had such amazing honesty and such an incredible like view for it. One of the things that she said was like she wanted to make that scene where Mehdi was in the car after her blind date, and he was taking her, somewhere to like assault her. She wanted to make it like real and not at all comedic, even though like the whole movie is a comedy. But just for that moment, she wanted that one to be very serious, because like it's a serious issue that women do face. And when she said that, I was like, oh wow, this is going to be really good. It's I'm so glad that like she is choosing to go down that route, and really tackling that head on, even though it might make audiences very uncomfortable. But I felt like that was really important. And so, yeah, I mean, her vision is just amazing. And I think if I remember right, like the entire team working on it is all female.
Wow.
Yeah, and mostly Asian. so
That's
so
amazing.
I think it is in really, really good hands, and I'm so excited about it.
I'm so excited. I can't wait for it to, come into the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll mean so much. And I I'm
Yeah.
And you're right. I think that shows, what we were talking about before, like life has both bitter and sweet moments, right? And that scene in the car was scary. I was scared when I was reading this for my, I know that there's going to be laughter ahead, but this moment itself is really serious, you could feel her terror. Yeah. Well, congratulations again. That's very, very cool. I think I have time for one more question. So I'm going to talk about your Twitter thread. So I first got to know you. I think the first thing that I read of yours was on Twitter. I feel like as writers, so many of my writer friends, I know them only through Twitter. Like that's how I've gotten to know them, which is great.
Yeah.
And you have this Twitter thread. I think it's still pinned to your profile. So, everyone go check it out. And basically you were writing about how long it took you and how your persistence played into getting published. As I mentioned before, this is your 9th book that you've written. And you wrote, so much in publishing depends on factors outside of your control. So congratulations on persisting. Can you talk a little bit about this? Like, I feel like so many hopeful writers aren't really prepared for how long this journey can take and how hard and painful rejection can be. And you also brought up a really important point, how important it is to have the right team behind you. Can you talk a little bit about, the kind of the psychology behind, lasting as a writer?
So I can't remember at what point. I think it was after book 8. I was like, oh, this is it. I think I need to kind of take a step back because this is not going anywhere. And and I did. Like, I felt like, okay, I'm just gonna quit. And I did take time off for like a few months. I didn't talk about anything publishing related. I still talk to my writing friends because by then they were like my family.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, unless it's like your news, I don't want to hear about anyone else's, publishing news. And so I took that time to kind of heal and kind of realize, well, actually, I am more miserable when I'm not writing. Like, I'm miserable when I'm writing, but I'm even more miserable when I'm not. So then I kind of, went back. Oh no, I think it was after my 7th book, because then I wrote an 8th book, which was like really, really, really dark and very, very sad. And I think I had to write that book before I can write like the lighthearted, joyous book that's like Aunties. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I feel that a lot of the time you get told, oh, as long as you work hard and you keep trying, you'll get there. But I feel like with publishing, that is so often not the case, because with like The Obsession, for example, it was that was my 5th book, and it was on submissions for such a long time. And at one point we were going to get an offer. Like, an editor was like, oh, my entire team loved it, we're just drafting an offer letter. And then 2 weeks later they were like, oh, we got a new department head and he didn't like it, so we're not going to offer after all. And so I really felt like, wow, this is completely outside of my control. You really can't do anything about it. And like, for example, the other book, the one that was like set in Indonesia, so many editors said that they loved it but couldn't find an audience for it. So it's a lot of things that are very dependent on other people. And also I kept hearing like, oh, it only takes one yes, but it actually doesn't. It actually takes a lot of yeses.
It's so
true. It takes the editor to like it, and then they have to then get second reads, get enough support, and then after that they have to like take it to the acquisitions meeting, and so like all the whole team has to agree. And so I was getting very discouraged, and okay, wait, no, this is way too depressing. So
no, it's real. It's real. Like, this is great. Because ultimately it has a happy ending, right? Like, you did sell Dial for Aunties, and you sold The Obsession. It came out in February. And you have a Netflix deal. So you are a success story, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. I feel that too. People only see the glamorous parts, but they don't see the heartbreak. Like for me, I feel like ever since I became a writer, everyone's like, you got published? Oh, I'm going to write a book and get published too. And it's like,
oh my gosh, yes.
right?
People
So
do that.
like so many people
Yeah.
have come up to me out of the wood, and I'm always very friendly, I'm encouraging, I'm like, that's great. But they literally, like, I feel sometimes people just like, oh, I just woke up today and decided to write a book. Like, no, son.
Yeah.
I've been working on this for 10 years. I've been doing this since I was 5. Like, you never saw the blood, sweat, and tears, but they were there, so I think
exactly.
this is real.
Yeah, like when people are like, oh, that's so inspiring, I'm gonna write a book too, and I kind of just want to like hug them and be like, oh, you just don't know what you're in for, but I'm here like
exactly
when you need like a listening ear. So writing friends are gold, and stick with them. They're the ones that will get you through.
Definitely 100%. And that's not to say that, everyone needs to dream. And I think that sometimes the naivety is the best thing you can do for yourself. Don't think about how hard it is. Just jump into it. So we have some questions for you, Jess. Okay. So Danielle here, we're going to start off, asks, Jess, what's the best part about getting your first book published? Great question.
What's the best part? Obviously, it's, having my nemesis know that I am superior.
Great answer.
And being like, I'm an author.
Love it.
No, I honestly cannot think of like a better reason.
That's so funny. Okay, best answer of the night. That was the best answer. Number 1, Annie has a couple questions for us. She asks, hey Annie, how did writing an adult novel compare to writing YA? Such a good question.
It's really weird because when I write YA, I feel so old. I feel like an old person trying to be young, and I have to keep Googling like teenage. Oh my God, I literally Googled teenage slang words. And I was like going through the list. I had to like squint at the computer, to like see the words. I'm like, I was like,
you're like an auntie, like, what is the?
Why does goat mean good? That makes no sense. So I feel very fraudulent writing YA, but I really enjoy it also because I feel like YA really delves into so much emotion. And, like as a teen, I just felt like everything was high emotion for me and like high drama. And I really love that feeling of like something amazing is waiting for me right after, school ends. Like the entire world is out there just waiting. I love that feeling. So that's my favorite part of writing YA. But weirdly, when I write adult, I feel too young. Like, okay, which, even though my character is like younger than I am, I'm like, oh no, now I have to pretend to be an adult. I don't know if you ever feel that way, Uzma.
Yeah. You know what I do? I teach high school during the day, so I hang out with a lot of teenagers, and they always make me feel very old. And then when I write my book, sometimes I feel, and I think being a fish out of water and kind of always being that observer is such a useful thing when you're a writer, because you're always open to other people's experiences, the empathy, the compassion that you have for your characters. It's really clear in your book. And I try to do that as well in my novels. Okay. Also, another question from Annie: what gets you in the mood? And this is for both of us. So, what gets you in the mood to write, and how do you stay so focused to finish? Do you want to answer this first?
Sure. Okay. So, what gets me in the mood to write is, I don't know. It's nothing, because I literally like just race down the stairs and start writing.
Yeah.
But what keeps me motivated is, so first of all, I have to remind myself that it's a really long marathon to write a complete book from start to finish. What's really helped is to take it in little chunks. So I have like a daily word count goal rather than like, oh, I need to, get up to 80,000 words, which is so many words, right?
So daunting.
It's horrible to think about. Yeah. So much more manageable if you're like, oh, I just need to get to 1,000 words today, or whatever. And I used to be a pantser, but now I am an outliner, and I'm trying to have longer and longer outlines, because they really help me. They make the situation a lot less intimidating, to kind of just know like, oh, okay, no, I have thought this through, and I know what each scene should achieve. So, but yeah, I would love to know your process.
I'm like you too, because I feel like I wear so many hats and I have so much going on. I feel like the time I have to write is so limited. I don't have little kids anymore, but I also feel like I only have maybe 1 hour or 2 hours a day. So the time is so precious. What really helps is deadlines, I find. So I write a column for the paper, for the Toronto Star, and it's like, that deadline is coming. I have to hand something in or I'm going to get fired. So I have to do it. And even with book deadlines, knowing I have a book due in less than a year is like, I need to write something. I don't want to disappoint my editor and ask for more time if I can avoid it. So that really helps. Day to day, I find sometimes, I'll have like a playlist like that I listen to, my Spotify account is often open. I'll listen to music. I'll go for a walk if I'm really stuck. It's the pandemic, so there's not much else I can do. So I go for long walks sometimes. And I'll call up my writing friends and complain about writing, because procrastinating about writing is part of being a writer. But it's like the best part of being a writer, being able to complain. And how I finish is, I feel like that's kind of a work in progress. I'm like you. It's so great to see that you're the same way. Like, daily word counts really motivate me. If I see that, oh, today I wrote 1,000 words, that's great. And then at the end of the week, I add it all up and I'm like, oh, this week I wrote 6,000 words. I get really happy, and I kind of make a note of it as I continue. And I'm also like you. I was a pantser, and now I'm firmly team plot. I even have like a Bristol, like a big bulletin board in my office behind where the camera is. And I kind of plot storyboard the entire book, and I sit down to write it. And then it comes out a little bit different. And then I storyboard again, and I just keep workshopping it in my mind until I kind of get it right. Yeah. And it takes a good 3 drafts to get there. Yeah. So we have a question from Lori Flynn. Jesse.
Hi, Lori.
Your friend. Writer friends. As you know, I love the Aunties so much and read this book in awe of how your brain works. How did you come up with the twists and continually surprise readers?
Oh my gosh, Lori is so funny. So Lori is the author of the best-selling novel, The Girls Are All So Nice Here. And I'm always asking her, like, how did you come up with the twists in your book? I have to kind of walk up and down. I just walk up and down from the living room to the dining room, and then I actually talk out loud to myself. I keep saying, okay, so now they have the body in the cooler. So what happens next? What happens next? And I'm just muttering out loud to myself. And then my husband would kind of pop his head out of the office and be like, are you talking to me? And I'd be like unnecessarily angry at him, like, no, like, stop interrupting my amazing, genius creative process, please. Like, but yeah, I literally just do that for days and days. This is what happens when I'm like in the process of writing the outline. And I just do that for days, in the shower, I'm like washing my hair and muttering like, so then what happens next? I don't know why it works so much better when I talk to myself and I'm doing something else that is not just sitting in front of the computer, like staring at the blank screen,
Yeah.
It kind of gives my mind something else to focus on, like chopping vegetables and, you know, whatever. But yeah, so
Yeah.
kind of having that distraction really helps.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the way a lot of people's brains work. That's why so many people have good ideas in the shower, or they'll when they're walking,
Yeah.
or if they're doing housework, or like,
Mm-hmm.
washing their hair. So I think that's such a good
Mm-hmm.
point. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that you talk to yourself. I feel, and the question you always ask is what happens next. I always do that too. Like,
Yeah.
okay, the movie has opened up to this point. Now what happens? And you just
Yeah.
you let your
Yeah.
brain kind of fill in the details.
Yeah.
And I feel like as a writer sometimes, like I'm a crazy person because I hear the voices in my head, but they're voices of my
Yeah.
characters. It's just like they talk to
Yeah.
me and I'm
Yeah.
like, shh, I don't have a pen, stop talking, come back later. They don't listen.
I love that.
Okay, so I have a question from Annie, and then I think we have time for one more from Jessica. So Annie asks, what's the best piece of advice you could give to emerging writers?
So I always say this, and because it's true, my best advice is to aim low. When I was first starting to write, I just felt really intimidated because I felt like I needed to come up with something good on the first try. And that ended up making me procrastinate for hours and hours and hours. Um, but as soon as I told myself, like, no, it's actually okay, you can just write garbage and then you can edit it later on and it's totally fine. And that was when I started to be able to write super fast, because, and I, like, if that little voice at the back of my head that's like, oh, this is so bad, no, 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 gets too loud, sometimes I even cover my computer screen so I can't see what I am writing. Because sometimes, like, I kind of read what I'm writing as I'm writing and I'm like, no, this is terrible. And if it kind of like overwhelms me, then I will stop writing. So, do whatever you kind of have to do to shut down that little mean voice at the back of your head, and kind of just focus on getting it out there, because it's easier to edit later on than like to come up with something new.
That is such good advice. Like I've heard this question so many times. I've been asked this question so many times, but that's really insightful. And you're so right that sometimes as writers, because we're putting all of our vulnerabilities out on the page, we are our worst critics. Like I don't know if anyone can say anything worse about my writing than I've already thought. And you're right. We can all fix it in edits, right? All writing is rewriting. I like the image of you covering your laptop with the cloth and then just typing. That's awesome.
That was actually my husband's idea.
Smart. Very smart. Okay, we got one last question from Jessica. Hi, Jess and Uzma. As a fellow Asian Indonesian, she's Indonesian. It's so great to read stories featuring Asian characters and stories. Like Jess mentioned, it's kind of hard to find publishers who would be interested or find a large audience for it. How were you able to bring Asian stories into the light for a large audience, yet still be true to what it represents and to go beyond the stereotypical expectations of Western readers? So I guess Jessica's asking how some tips on what do you think about finding a large audience and trying to find publishers interested in the Asian experience?
Yeah. So, unfortunately, as I mentioned before, stories set in Indonesia were, a little bit too foreign for a US audience. Of course, this happened a few years ago, and Crazy Rich Asians has done so much, I think, for Southeast Asians, because I really felt like ever since Crazy Rich Asians happened, a lot of people in publishing and in Hollywood were looking for and are looking for more Asian stories. So I think that has opened the door for a lot of us. And so unfortunately for me, I just had to keep setting my stories in the US first. But now that I find I have books that are published, it gets easier to get more authenticity into your stories. And so my next YA is set in Indonesia. And I'm like, I was so happy when I was writing it, because I was like, and I can include like, this aspect, like the coffee in Indonesia, and I can include,
the
that
coffee.
aspect. Yeah.
I miss the coffee.
It's so strong. I'm like,
so
like,
good.
just, yeah. So, I found that I had to kind of do it bit by bit, like very little bit by very little bit. But then once you like kind of have your foot in the door, then you can like barge in and be like, ha, like.
I love that.
And I do hope that this kind of like brings more Asian stories to light. So I think we're in a really great position right now, because it's just gonna, I think you're just gonna see more and more Asian stories from here on out.
I think so. I think of Raya and the Last Dragon, like that movie that just came out recently, and it's set in, it's set in some amalgamation of Southeast Asian. And it's funny you should mention Crazy Rich Asians. That movie came out, I think, in 2018, and my novel came out in 2018 too. And one of the reasons why my novel Aisha at Last was optioned for film by Pascal Pictures was because of Crazy Rich Asians, because all of a sudden because the movie did so well, and all of a sudden they're like, what? People are interested in diverse love stories. Okay, diverse love stories. And then my book got optioned by Pascal Pictures, and I'm sure
they're exciting.
They're a huge Hollywood producer. I'm so grateful. So in a way, it's like we are all opening the doors. The more we produce, the more we put out there, we are opening doors. And of course, having people support us is so important. Jess, this was so much fun talking to you. Congratulations on Dial A for Aunties. I wish you all the success. This is so exciting to see you launch off with this amazing book.
Thank you so much, Uzma. Oh my gosh, that was so fun.
Yeah, for sure.
If any of you came in halfway through or missed anything, we do put these events on our Belmont Books YouTube channel, so you can kind of catch up on what you missed. Of course, thank you to Uzma and Jessie. We have all of Uzma's books, all of Jessie's books in the store if you want to order from Belmont Books. We do ship around the US. I put a link in the chat directly to the event page. We do ship around the US, but if you're not US based, please support one of your local independent bookstores. If you have one near you, they are kind of being hit pretty hard by the pandemic, so any support you can show an indie is greatly appreciated. Thank you both so much. It was so lovely spending the evening with you. Is it morning where you are, Jessie?
Yeah.
The morning with you. And if you want to hear more about Jessie's books, I believe she's got more events coming up. So I guess check Jessie's social media if you want to hear more about Dial A for Aunties. But thank you so much.
And Uzma has like a whole bunch coming up.
Of course, Uzma was on TV today, apparently.
I know.
I was on TV.
She's
I had to put on
star.
Tons of makeup. This was so much fun, Jess. Let's do this again. Amanda, thank you so much. It's always great. Belmont Books is awesome. Thanks so much for the support, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.